Hello everyone. In the previous video, we have built front end of our TodoList full stack application. We have built various components like register, to-do form, to-do list, and we have coupled all the components in our entry point file, which is app.js, and we also used a router to route or navigate through various pages in our application. So, and each and every part of our application is connected. So in this part we are going to complete our backend part. So as we have already discussed, we are going to use MongoDB database as we are using MERN stack. So Mongo, Node and Express are going to be our backend technologies. Along with that, we are going to use some packages like Mongoose, Helmet, Course. We will see their uses in some time. So and in the last video we will just couple both backend and front end, and then we will do some basic styling and we will host our application as well, right? So let's just start with our backend part. So I have opened an empty folder and I will just make one file name as row.js which is empty. And for initializing your node package, what you have to do, you have to run this command npm init. So npm initializes your package and it asks few questions, so you can answer them if you want, or as it is not necessary. So description, let's say backend of our to-do list, right? Then entry point is server.js which I have created, right? You can change it as well, but I will just keep it as generic. Okay, so git repository we will mention it later. Then keyword, let's say to do MERN, right? Author, you can put your name here, right? Okay, so it will just create a node package for you, so you can check. These are the commands, and here we don't see any dependency as we have not installed it till now. So we will just simply install all the dependencies which we are going to need. So let's say npm install mongoose. Then we are going to need express for routing and initializing our app server. Then helmet, course, Morgan. I will explain uses of these three middlewares in some time when we are going to implement them. Then we are going to need bcrypt, and .env for securing our Mongo URL or any other passwords in a file where online users can't see, as it is stored in our .env file which is not exposed to the online content, right? And what else we are going to need? So for now we will just install these libraries. So while our libraries are getting installed, so we will just make some folders as we have to structure our app, right? So one folder is for database, then one is for model where we are going to create a user and to do model. Then we are going to need routes folder, right? So this is it. So we will just import express. So in node.js you can import like this using const variable and require keyword, right? So I will just initialize one app like this. So it initializes express server, and now we can run commands. So let's say app.get, so get, and let's pass empty URL, and we can just pass one arrow function. Okay, and we will just pass one request and response, and this response will say send. So let's say welcome to our application. So when our Express server gets started, so it will just send this message to our server, right? Also we have to run our run and also mention the port on which we are going to run our application. So for now let's say 7070, and again we will just check it by logging the message server is started, right? So we will put this port variable in .env file in a minute, or we will just do it now. .env.local, and let's say const equal to, let's say 7070. Okay, and we can just import it, and we have to just import .env require .env right, and let's say .env.config. So instead of writing it this way, we can just use a secure variable which will not allow others to get any information which we have stored in our environmental variable. So let's say process.env.port, right? So this way you can access and make the variables in your .env file, right? So for now or we will just proceed to make our database file, right? As we have to connect our MongoDB. So let's say connect db.js. okay, and what we are going to need, we are going to need mongoose. The use of mongoose in backend is to perform all the let's say for creating schemas, models, or creating MongoDB 2 database. So basically it is a client of MongoDB database in backend, right? Mongoose, and now we are going to need Mongo URL for initializing our app, but first I will just import .env as we are going to need it here as well, right? And .env.config, so you can access the properties or the functions of .env. So I will just make one connection like this, so it will be a arrow function, and make it async as if there is any problem, or let's say there is any delay, so that application will get information to wait, or should it return any error message or not, right? So we will use try catch blocks, and let's say await. So mongoose.connect, so this is the command, and here we have to specify our Mongo URL. For now I will keep it empty as we will collect the Mongo URL in a minute. So here again we will just make one arrow function, or you can just keep it empty for now, right? As we are not going to run backend in this video, we are just going to build all the files, and I will just make one short video in some days where I will run backend and test all the APIs using Postman. So you can also get idea of how we can test our APIs without actually starting your front end or connecting your backend to front end. So Postman is a great tool to do it, and I will make one video on it as well, right? So here you can go to cloud.mongodb.com, and here you can create your new project. So you can name it anything. I will just explain. Name it to do. Then it will specify the owners of project. So it will be the one who is creating it, right? So okay, you can add all the IP address which you want to get access your database, right? And we will just build our database. So for now, as we are just building this application for development purpose, so we are going to use this free cluster, right? And AWS is fine. So traffic lights, okay. So it will auto generate a password for you, so I will just copy it, and for now I will just paste it here, right? And let's say create user. Right, and add my current IP. Okay, this is already added, so we can just say finish and close, right? So we have successfully created our database. Now we have to connect this database to our backend, right? So you can click on this connect. Then there are multiple options. You can connect using shell or compass or in VS Code, but we are going to use these drivers. So here you have to specify your backend language. So we are currently using Node.js. So it will just give you your URL which you have to connect, right? So here I will make one variable URL, okay, and paste its URL here. And notice here they have given a generic password field. So what you have to do, you have to just delete it and you have to paste your password there, right? And you can save. So now you can access your URL, right? process.env.mongo URI, right? So now you have your Mongo URL. You can just say console.log connected to database, or in the if we face any error here, so in the cache block you can just console.log error, right? So this is it. We can just for using any file to another file, you have to export it from here. So this is how you can export. Module.export is equal to connection, right? We are just going to need this connection function. So now in the server.js file we will just import it. Const connect db is equal to require, and in the current directory in the database in the connect db file, right? And we can just say connect connect db. Okay, and it will just run your connection function and your database will get connected to our backend server, right? So backend connection is done. You can just close these files. Then we will just start building our models, as they are going to be the one of the most important parts of our project. So what models are? Basically, model is a structure of object which you are going to store it in your database. So I will just give you one example. So let's say you are creating, we will just take our own example. So we have to create a to-do and we have to save those to-dos in our database, but your database don't know that what properties which should be saved in your backend, and it just doesn't know about the structure. So we have to specify the structure. So let's say we are creating some user, and then user is gonna have properties like name, username, email, password, right? So you have to tell your database that my user is going to have this much properties, so you should take care of them as a combined object, and it is useful for accessing that information or creating new users, right? So I will just remove it, and we will create schemas, models. So you will get idea what I am talking about. So let's say user dot model dot js, right? So for creating models, we are going to need mongoose. As I already told you, mongoose work like a client for MongoDB in backend, and it provides all the ways of let's say interacting with database, right? So we are going to need mongoose, and we can just create schema, right? So let's say new mongoose not schema. Schema is basically a structure, right? So it has certain properties. So in the front end, if you remember, we have made some fields like email, name, and password. So here we are going to create those same fields so that we can save the user which we are creating in front end to our database, so that we can access it later, or just to keep track of activity happening in our application, right? So it is going to have some properties like username. So type of this property is going to be string. Then it is going to be required, right? Then it should be unique. Right? So no two users can have same field which we have set unique is equal to true, as it just filters out unique elements or the unique objects from our database if we have mentioned that filter, right? And let's say minimum characters to our username, let's say 4, right? So user can have username of more than or equal 4 words, 4 letters, right? So this is it. Then we can create name. So type is string, then required is true, and okay, we cannot put unique property to our name, as multiple users can have same name, right? So it is not needed. So now we are gonna need email as well. So type is again string, then it is going to be a required property, right? And it is going to be unique, as with one email one user or anyone cannot open two accounts to our application, as it can cause problems of leaking data, right? And after one, we are going to need password. So type is again going to be a string required to, right? And we have to make some foundations here, right? So let's say minimum characters 5 and maximum characters 30. So user should put number of letters from 5 to 30 in his password. So user's password should not be smaller than 5 characters and should not exceed 30 characters, right? For this purpose we are bounding with these properties, right? And what else we are going to need? So let's say created, so it will just specify the time or the date. So let's say date on which a user created his account on our application, right? And we will assign default value, as we are not going to take any input or any information from user, so we will just assign it on our own, right? So this is it, I guess. Username, name, email, password, and created, right? So we can just export this. Module.exports is equal to, say, mongoose.model, and let's say user schema, right? So user schema is done. So we have assigned username, name, email, password, and created properties, and assigned various fields like required, unique, minimum, maximum, type, default, as per each property, right? So similarly you will just quickly create to-do model, right? So what properties to-do model is going to have, as we have already discussed, is it is going to have one text which is containing the message or the task which user stored through that message. Then we had to do is complete property which was boolean, right? Then id for each to do, and here we are going to need one additional property, user id, as we should get information about which to do belongs to which user, right? As we cannot randomly show any to dos to any random user, right? The user should see all the to dos which himself he have created, and he should not access to dos of others as well, right? So we can just quickly create those properties. Right, then what we have to do, we can just create schema. Schema is equal to new schema, right? And properties are text, so text is string, and it is necessary as we cannot create empty to do, right? Required true, and let's say maximum 300. Okay, user can put up to 300 letters in his to do text. Then we are going to need is complete, so it is going to be a boolean, and it is not required, but it is going to have some default value, and let's say it is false, as by default all the to-dos are false. So when user clicks on that to-do, as we have set up in our front end, when user clicks on edit to do, it gets completed and gets one dash over it, so that user should know that it is created or not, right? So then the next property ID, so type is again going to be string, and it is required, right? And in the last, for identifying user of each to do, we have to pass user ID as well, right? So type, we can pass here mongoose dot id, but we will just keep it simple and pass it string, and we will just connect both in the backend, right? And require is true, as without login without logging, user should cannot create to do, so we are making this user ID property true, right? So this is it. We can just export this. Module dot export is equal to language dot model. So let's say to do and to do schema, right? So schema part is done, both user and to do. So now the most important part, we have to create the routes. So we will just first create routes for user, right? So routes is basically the functions or the request which the front end can send to backend for accessing or let's say manipulating the information. So it can have various types like create, then we can have update operation, as user can update his information or any information which belongs to him. Then he can delete the information, as user can have access to delete his own information. So or access, right? We can access information which we have stored in front end, right? So let's just start creating our routes. So we are going to need express for router, require, right? And we will just initialize one router, express not router, right? So router basically takes request from front end to back end, and it just responds with the message or let's say information which server passes it to the router, right? So that's why router is very important. Without router you cannot communicate between backend and front end. So we are going to need schema, right? Require, so in the previous directory, so in the model folder and in the user.model, right? So we are going to need some more functions. I will just quickly import it and I will explain you why we are importing them. So from express validator, so I forgot to install it, so I will just quickly import it. Express validator, right? So I hope spelling is correct. Okay. Okay. So is express validator is useful for checking and authenticating let's say authorizing the user or other request. So there are some functions which we are going to need. So let's say check and validation result. So check is basically used to check properties like email. So let's say if you want to check in the email field whether the string given by user is email or not. So for that these functions are used. So I have imported them. Also we are going to need bcrypt for hashing the password, right? Bcrypt, right? So we'll just start our route. So we will first create login route, right? So let's start. Here you can see various options which are get, use, host, delete, right? But login is kind of the posting route where you post your data from front end to back end, and it just authenticates whether we have the user of this information, and if we have any user with the information we are currently asking, so a server just returns the information or the data which we are seeking, right? So let's just create, or we will just create first register, right? We will first register our user, then we can create other routes. Register is most important. So register, then in this array we are going to have checks which we are going to do using this express validator. This is why express validator is important. So I will just explain, or we will just start and you will get what I am trying to say. So we will just make one first check. So the name entered by the user, and here we are going to have some string. Then we are going to check not dot empty, right? So what this line means, the name field which is provided by user should contain some characters or some string, right? It should not be empty, or else we should not proceed to create our user. So for that these checks of express validator are very handy, right? So here we will just mention name is required, it should not be empty, right? So we will check for other properties as well. So we are going to say username, and we will just paste the same message, right? As it should not be empty, right? Okay, so it should be comma. So check, then we will check our email, right? So let's say email, and what we are going to check, we are just simply going to say is email, right? As user should put email in email field, as all the emails provided by users should be valid, right? So we will just say provide valid email address, right? So now the last check is for password. Check, so password field, and we will put message in a minute. And what we are going to check, so here you can see password has these two limitations, or let's say restrictions. So we are going to check them, right? Is length, and what we are going to provide, so max, let's say min should be 5 and maximum should be 30, so it should be between 5 to 30, right? So this is it. And here you can see we don't need to check is not is empty field, as we are directly checking length field, and length field will identify whether that field is empty or not. So message, we are going to provide some message. So let's say password should contain at least 5 and at most 30 characters, right? So this is it. So the checking part is done. Now we have to build our function. Okay, so I will just make it okay. So it will be, we have to put comma. So asynchronous function, which is going to take request and it will send response from server to front end, right? And what we are going to have in the function part. So here we are going to put all the conditions which are not included here, and if we get any error from one of these checks, so we will instantly return from here. So we will just write the code. So I will make one variable called const errors is equal to, so this validation result function which we have imported from Express Validator, it collects all the checks which got or let's say which fields get wrong from the check array, and it will just provide you the information about the results, right? So if we get any error from one of these checks, so let's say if name is empty or username is empty, or let's say email is not valid, or let's say password length is not valid, so this validation result will just quickly add that error in the errors array, right? So what we have to check, if errors is empty, so errors is empty means error array is empty, and we are putting not sign, that means errors array is not empty. So in this case we can just return from here, right? So we can just say return with response dot status code, so let's say 400, and we will pass those errors, right? So it will be errors and errors dot, this is an array, so we'll just pass it like this, right? So if we get any error from this checks, so this line will instantly return from here and will tell about what errors you got while creating this account, right? And then we can put those errors as display messages, or let's say flying error tags to user for getting for letting him know that user have created some kind of mistake, right? So if we don't get any error, we will proceed to create our user. So let's create some try catch block, and right? Here also we have to check some information, right? So I will just create one late variable. I'm not creating const this time, as I am going to assign various values to this same variable again and again, so that's why I am using lit, right? So you can say user dot find one, and here you can check the email field, right? As what we are doing is we are checking if we already have any user with the email address which is provided by the user, right? So we can do it for username as well, as we have already told that username is also gonna be unique, but for now we will just code for email, right? As it is going to be a same code. So if we get this user, then we can just return from here like this was our status with 404 code, and we will just pass one message through JSON text with user already exists. So you cannot create, right? You cannot create two users with the same email. So this line is telling user is already exist, so you cannot just create. So we are just returning from here with the status code 404, right? So if it fails, that means there is no user with that email, so we can proceed to create our user. So then let's say user is equal to new user, right? And we can just pass on the properties. So I'll just take them request dot body. I will just extract all the properties from request dot body like this, so that we don't need to use request dot body keyword all the time, right? Or I will just do it that way first, and we will change it to this, so that you will get an idea. So username is going to be request dot body dot username, then name is going to be request dot body dot name, email is going to be request dot body dot email, then password is going to be request dot body dot password, right? But here is problem, we cannot directly store the password given by user, as it is not safe, as hackers can easily get information about that by hacking our server, or let's say passing some unnecessary viruses or anything like that which leaks the data, right? So we have to prevent it using the bcrypt.js, right? So what bcrypt does is it hashes the password. So I will just explain what we are going to do. So let's say the password provided by you is password, let's say 12345. So what hashing do is, so hashing just picks this password 12345 and adds certain random characters. So it can it may look like 1#254, right? So this password is 12345 itself, but it is hashed with some random characters, so no one can identify its original value, right? So for this we are going to hash the password. So we are just going to sort it with 10 to 12 characters. So we can say await, and we can use bcrypt dot generate salt, and we can pass any number of characters, so I will just pass 12, right? And so our hashed password is going to be, let's say, await bcrypt dot hash with request dot body dot password and salt, right? So we have hashed our password with salt of 12 characters, and instead of storing the password provided by user, we will just store this hashed password, right? Okay, and after that the work is done, so we can just say user.save, and for confirming we can just pass one status code of 200, which is a success code, right? JSON user, right? So this is it, the register route is done, and in the catch block we can just say dot status 500 dot JSON, and we can just pass this error, right? Or let's see, okay, let it be, right? So the register route is done. So now let's just create login router quickly. So I'm going to copy some data, so I'll just copy this, right? Login, and it's not needed, right? And here we are just going to check email and password. As for login, we are not going to need username or name, right? Expression, right? Okay, and we will just create asynchronous arrow function, which is going to have request and response, and again we will just collect all the errors from validation request. So I will not explain this part again, as you can see it I have explained in register route, right? So they are doing the pretty much same work. So here it's request, right? So again we will check if our errors dot, if it is not empty, so in this case we will just return dot status 404 JSON, and we will pass this array itself, errors not array, right? So if we don't get any error, that means the credentials are correct. So we will proceed to check the further things. So let's say const user is equal to await. So we are using await as it is an asynchronous function, right? So you can use various options here, find by id, find one. So I am going to use find one, as I am going to provide email, right? So email, and where we are going to get this email from the request.body, right? So if in any case we don't get any user with that name, so we'll just return from here with response status 404.json user not found, as here we are checking with email whether we have any user with that email or not. So if we don't have that email in our database, so we'll just quickly return from here itself, right? So if we get ahead of it, that means we have a user with that email, then we have to validate our password as well, right? So check password. So how we are going to check? So here notice one thing, we cannot directly check we cannot directly check the request.body password is equal to user.password. We cannot do this because the password which we have stored in our database is hashed. As I already told you, we have hashed with some salted with some characters, and then we have stored it in database to increase our safety. So we cannot directly check it like this, so we have to use our bcrypt function. So bcrypt will check the hashed and the without hash password, as it can encrypt and decrypt the password both sides, right? So it can have information about hashing and decrypted password, so it can compare them. So we can just pass here request.body.password and user.password, right? So this is going to be a boolean, as bcrypt will tell whether both are matching or not. So if check password is not true, then we will just return from here as well. Response.status 400, okay, 400 .json wrong password entered, right? As in this step we get the user with this email correctly, but the password which user have provided is not correct in our database, right? So that's why we pass this message to user that the password which you have entered is not correct. And if in any case it is correct, then we can just say it is so 200 is basically a success code. That means the user have successfully entered his credentials, and we have validated it, we have checked. So in this case we can just send the user, right? And I think we should just put this in try catch block, right? So it should be here, and in the error part we can just say 500, which is the failure code, JSON error, right? So login and register routes are done. So now what we have to do, we have to make one get route where you can access the information of user, right? With the with only using ID. In this case we are accessing information using email for login purposes, but if user wants to check his profile or anything, or if he wants to update his information, so we should have one way to get his information. So we just create one get route, so it will be a shorter code compared to login and register. So this sign means we are passing a parameter. So I'll just quickly explain. So here sometimes you see the URLs have some variables, right? So if you visit any website and it has like some page numbers, right? If you click on to next page, the number gets changed. So here you can see the address is changing. So like this you can have various properties in your parameters. So this way you can pass your request through parameters as well. So that means you are going to put or pass the ID of your user without taking input as a parameter using this technique, right? So in this case you are not going there is no need of taking any input from user to get his information. We will just directly take his ID by our own and we will just make this request, right? So how we are going to do it? So let's say again request response and create one arrow function, right? And then let's say try catch block. So let's say const user is equal to await user dot find one, and here till now what we are passing, we were passing request dot body as we are providing some input kind of information to our function. But in this case we are providing parameter, we are providing information in our parameter. So here we are going to say request dot params dot id, right? So we are passing some id as a parameter which is going to be our main variable for checking or accessing any information, right? So we can restructure the properties which we want from the user. In the end what we have to do, first I will explain what we are going to do. JSON user, right? We have to return the user, but can you spot the problem why we should not do this, right? So if we see, we have username, name, email, password and created this much fields in our user schema, and if we directly pass this user as a JSON object to our front end, so it may cause various problems, as it will directly tell the password or hash password which is more vulnerable to the front end, and the privacy of app will get disposed, and which is not a good sign. So you should not pass password in any kind of information when performing get request, as while doing post request we can do that, as we can access that information as we are building or let's say creating some object. But the get request directly connects with the front end or the client, and it will directly pass the information which we are passing in this response. So you should not directly pass this user. So what can we do? So there is one thing in JavaScript known as destructuring. So I will just explain it here. So destructuring means you can pick various properties of that user using this destructuring method. So let's say if you want to pass email, then let's say username, name, right? So you can destructure these properties and we can pass them here. But what I will just do it the reverse. So I will just extract password separately and I will keep all the remaining properties in authors array. So this triple dot means the destructuring of array. That means So I will just explain you it here. So let's say you have 1 2 3 4 5, right? And if I say 1 comma others, so this other is equal to 2 comma 3 comma 4 comma 5, as we have separated one from the other characters, and if we are accessing this other, that means except one, all the remaining properties will get included in that other keyword, right? So we will just explain, we will just take others from here, right? So this is it. In the catch block we will just say response.status 500.json error, right? So the get method is also done. So now we have to create two more methods, update and delete. As you can remember, for to do as well, we are going to do these methods as well. So stay focused and see how we are doing and manipulating the information, as we are going to need it in the to do as well, right? So now we will perform update. So this is get a user, this is login user, okay, update user. So for update we are going to use put, as the put is a REST operator which is used for updating or manipulating the information, right? So again we are going to take it via parameters. So let's just make a asynchronous function, request response, right? So here we have to check if request so here what we are going to do is we are going to take information from user as well, and we are going to put the parametric information by ourselves, so we can compare if the information provided by user and the information we already have is matching or not, as user A should not manipulate or change any information of user B, right? So for that we have to make this check. So here we will say if request.body.user_id is equal to request.params.id, right? So then only we can do this work, right? Else we can just return with status code, or let's say this time 403, and let's say you can update only your information, right? So one user cannot access or update information of other users. So for that we are making this check, right? So again we are going to build it in two cases. So if user wants to change its password, so we cannot directly assign all the input data to our current or the data which is present in our database, as we have to hash the new password as well. So we will check request.body.password, then we have to do separate work. So again I will just use try catch block here, so that we can get rid of all the errors, right? So if you want to change password, then we have to create new salt. So await decrypt dot generate salt, and let's say 12, I have already done 12, I guess. Okay, 12, so we'll put 12 as well this time, right? And let's say hashed is equal to decrypt dot hash request dot body dot password and this salt. So I'll just put one of it here as well. As okay, and we will just put or okay. So without okay, request dot body. So what I will do is I will just change it here as well. So hashed, right? So if user wants to change its password, so we have directly assigned the hash password to the request.body, so that in the later part we can directly set all the new information to the old one or replace old one, right? So in this case you can just say response.status with let's say 500.json error, right? So after this case, so what we are going to do, we have to do the remaining work. So again we have to use try catch block, and till now we have just set up the hash password to the request.body.password. Okay, so now we have to assign all the new information in all the new given information by user to the information which is present in our database. We have to replace it, right? So again I will just say const user is equal to await user dot find one, and I will just say find one and update. So right, so what we have to check it or find it using request.params.id, as you can put request.body.user id as well, as we have already checked whether both of these are equal or not, right? So it doesn't matter, right? And in the second argument we have to set, so this is the syntax of updating any information. So I will just set request.body, right? And so after successfully updating the information, we will just send 200 status code with the message information successfully updated, right? And in the catch block we will just say restore status 500.json, and we will just pass errors, right? Okay, we don't need to create any user, we can directly change it using find one and update. So this find one and update function will just find user which has the ID which we have passed to this function, and then it will just set the parameters which are this username, email, password, and email and password with the new one which we have provided in our request.body, right? So update is also done. So now we have to create last one for user, which is delete, right? So let's say router.delete, and again with the id and asynchronous function request response, right? So again we have to check if request dot body dot user id is equal to request dot params dot id, right? So this request dot body dot user id and request dot params dot id difference, you will get more information, or let's say all the doubts will get cleared in the last video, where we are going to connect our backend to frontend. So we are going to access all these properties in the frontend, right? So you will get all the information, right? So if this is not equal, so in the else part you will just return response dot status code 404.json, and it will be you can only delete your account, right? As the user id provided by user and the user id which is present in our database for that user are not matching, so we can just pass one error as you can only delete your account, right? And if both are same, so we can proceed to delete our account. So I will just place one try catch block, and what we can do, let's say await user find and delete, something like that, find by id and delete. So you can use any of those. So here I can say request not, right? And we will just say response not status 200.json account successfully deleted, right? So okay, in this case we can just say response status 100.json and we will pass errors, right? So all the routes are done, so we will just quickly go through them once again. So in the first route we have created register route, which will take information from user and create new user in our database. So we have used validation result and check from access validator to make some basic checks before proceeding to create new user. So they will first check if name field is empty or not, then it will check whether username is empty or not, then it will check whether the email given by user is valid or not, and then it will check the length constraint of password, right? After that we are checking if we are getting any errors from this. So if we get any error, we will just return from here, and if not, we will proceed to create our user. So I have used late variable for finding if our if any user is already there in our database with this given email. So if it is, we will just say user already exists and return from here. So if it is not, we can create that user. So for that we have used bcrypt.js for hashing the password. So we can hash password with any number of characters. I am hashing it with 12 characters, right? So then we can create a user. So I will just explain how we can do this by destructuring in a shorter code. So you can destructure it from user. You can just take username. You can just access all the properties directly, right, by destructuring it, email and password, right? So there is no need of putting this here. It will be request.body, right? and password should be equal to hash password, right? So no need to check it, right? So after that we are saving the user and sending the success code of 200 with the information of user, right? After that we have created login route where we are taking email and password as input, and we are checking if email is valid and the length constraints, whether the email length the password length is greater than or equal 5 and less than or equal 30, right? So if it is not, we will get errors here and we will just return from this line, right, with status code of 404. So if not, we can proceed to login. Then we are finding the email with we are finding user with the email and taking the email from request.body, right? So if we don't get any user, we will just return as user not found. If we get, so we will proceed to verify the password with bcrypt.compare, as we cannot directly compare request.body.password and user.password, as the password which is stored in user.password is hashed using bcrypt.js. So we have to use the inbuilt function of bcrypt.compare to compare those two passwords. And then we have created one get a user, update a user, and delete a user routes, where in a get a user we are passing on the properties except password, as it should not be vulnerable to anyone, or anyone should not access that hashed password, as it will leak all the data of user, right? So in the update we are taking we are checking with two parameters, right? So we are passing one parameter id in parameter which is present in our database, and one we are taking from user, which user is passing in information input, right? So if those are not matching, we are directly returning from here saying you can only update your information, right? And if they are matching, we can just update the information using find one and update function, right? So this is the code, and similarly we can do for delete, right? So user routes is done. So now we can proceed to create the next route, which is todo.routes.js, which is the last part of this video, right? So we are going to need express, right? And here we are not going to need any express validator, as we are not going to check email or anything like that, and other checks we can directly do without that library, right? So it will just reduce the code for the to do part, right? So we are going to need router, so we can just initialize it with express.router, and we are going to need schema or the model of to do, which we will take from the model folder in todo.model, right? So now we will just start by create to do, route, right? So async request response, right? So we will just say const new to do is equal to new to do request dot body, right? So we can just directly take information from user with which user is providing, right? And we can just put try catch block, and let's say const save to do is equal to await new to do dot save, right? and we can just directly send the status code of success. Save to, right? This is it. And in the case of errors, we can just pass 500.json error, right? So here you might get confused that we are not making any checks like we did in user, as we can do that, but I don't want to repeat the same thing again and again. And if we are going to need any more checks or anything, so we can just add it in a few minutes in the next video, right, where I am going to test all the APIs to you. So the next short video is going to be on the API testing using Postman, right? So I will just make one video for testing all the APIs in Postman, right? As in the current video I haven't started server and checked the routes, right? As the video will get too longer, and then I will not get time to explain all the things in detail, right? So we will just make one short video for this purpose only in a few days, right? So then we are going to need one get route. So let's say get post, right? Just replace it with double quotes. In JavaScript both work as the same for 99% of time, but sometimes you have to mention single or double quotes according to the library or function you are currently using, right? So for get, we can directly say try catch const to do, and we have to mention one parameter or the factor by which you can get this to do. So I will just say we have to take ID as a parameter to verify the to do, or to say, let's say there are 5 users and each of them have created some number of to dos, and user 2 is currently accessing our application, or let's say surfing through our application, so he should only see his created to dos, right? So for that we have to make some kind of filter or let's say check, so that all the to dos gets uniquely identified. So for that reason in the to do model we have provided user ID, right? So we will search by user ID, and we will just pass all the to dos which are associated with that user, right? So let's say to do and await, we will find to do and one using find by ID, right? As we are passing the ID, so require params dot ID, right? And we can just return status code of 200 with this to do, right? And in the else block we can just say 500.json errors, right? So again now we have to do it for update and delete as well, right? So we'll just quickly make them. Router dot put is for update, get is for access, post is for posting new information or saving new information, and delete is for deleting or discarding the current information which is present in our database, right? So again here let's say delete and ID, right? And asynchronous function request response, and again we can do the same work which we have did, right? So try catch block cons to do is equal to await to do dot find one and delete, right? Find by id and delete, right? So we can just pass request dot params dot id, right? And we will just say status of 200, which is the success code. Right, we will just pass this message, and in the case of failure or the error we will just pass this line, right? And it will be delete. Okay, I have created delete one instead of complete run. Okay, fine, we can just make it delete, and we can create a new one for the update. Put using id asynchronous request response, and it will be same, right? We'll just completed successfully, and we can just pass this to do as well, right? Okay, so there is no need to store it in object. Okay, so this is it. We have created all the required routes of to-dos. They are not 100% complete. We are going to complete them while testing, which we are going to perform in few days using Postman. So while doing it, I will add more checks and authentication part in our to-do routes, but for basic structure this is done. So we have created create, get, update and delete 4 routes, and for user we have created register, login, then get a user, update a user and delete user, right? So the routes part is done, so we can just directly import all the routes in the server.js file, which is our entry point. So let's say user route require, so in the routes user routes, right? For the to-do route right, so here we have to put middlewares as well, but before that I will just first add all the routes, right? So I have dot use, so we have to specify our endpoint. So let's say API, let's say user, right? And then user route simply, and in the next one, so let's say API to do and to do route. Okay, so the only part remaining is middlewares. So I have told you to import some middlewares, which are course, helmet, Morgan, right? So we'll just say we'll just import them, and I will just explain you uses of those middleware. So first let's say app dot use course. So we have to import them, right? Okay. I haven't imported them. Require course. Same for helmet and normal, right? So we can just say helmet, then Morgan, and here you can pass the parameter common, right? And one more, we have, as you can see, in all the places we have used the JSON format for sending the request or the response to the front end from the server. So for that it is better to use express.json, right? So it will pass all the information in JSON format, right? So I will just explain you or I will just mention it here for data format, right? Or let's say data parsing. Okay, so course is used for tackling the privacies which are set up which are set by browser, as if you don't include this course package in your backend, then your frontend might get some errors saying the following application is not meeting the requirements of force policies which are defined by Chrome or let's say all other browsers. So for that we have to use this library, right? So helmet is basically used to secure express from various cross attacks, right? So our server should be secured. So it is for saving from attacks, saving server, or let's say express server, right? And in the last, the Morgan, we are using Morgan as it is nothing but just a middleware logger. So you can get information about all the middlewares and their logging and functioning, right? So for that these libraries or packages are used. So while development they might be not compulsory, as you can remove all of them, but it is a good practice to use these libraries and packages, right? So for today this is it. So I will just take you through it once again. So we have installed various packages first, or dependencies in our application, and for initializing package we have used command npm init. So after that we have created one server.js entry point file, and here we have access all the information or all the files which are, let's say first one is connectdb. Here we are connecting our database to our backend. So this process.env.mongo URL is present here, and you can access it from here directly using process.env extensions, so that it is not exposed to the front end work. So that's why we are using environmental variables. So this function will just connect your database to server. Then we have created two models. First one is user model. So here user have some properties like username, name, email, password, and created date, right? So and the other one is to do, and to do has text, is complete, id, and user id, this much properties, right? So after creating model, we have done the most important and challenging part, which is creating routes, as without routes you cannot perform any you cannot respond to any request provided by user, right? So we have created register route where we have made some checks, then hashed our password before saving it, and then we have saved our user successfully. If we are successful to do our current job, then we have passed status code of 200, which is known as success code. In case of failure, we have passed the 500 or 400, 404, 403, this success code, which are failure codes, right? Then we have similarly created login route where we have checked our password using bcrypt.compare, as we cannot directly compare the hashed and the normal password, right? So for that we have used this inbuilt function. Then we have created get a user route where we have passed all the properties except password, as we cannot send our password to frontend or to anyone, as it will create privacy issues, right? And we have also created update a user and delete a user routes, right? Where we have first verified whether the user wants to delete this account is himself, or the other user is trying to do this work or not. So for that we have made some checks so that we are authorizing that user to make any action on that account, right? So similarly we have created to do routes where we have create, get, update and delete, right? So next video is going to be on testing. So testing means basically the API testing, where so we are going to test all these REST APIs using Postman. So we are going to check all the functions which we have created in routes by providing hard-coded data, and we will perform each and every function, and we will check whether it is working as we are expecting it to or not, right? And if we are going to get some error, as we haven't checked this code, we have just written the structure, or let's say we have just written the code. So after checking we might get some errors, so we will just fix them. And then in the third part we are going to connect this backend to frontend, and then we can just perform all the functions in the frontend as well, right? So in the last part we will just provide some basic styling after connecting backend, and then we might host this application live as well for you to have a reference and check all the functionalities, right? So for now everything is done from my side. So like this video if you get any information, or if you think this is useful. And so okay, everything is done. So thank you for now, and let's meet in the next video. So thank you and bye bye.